The first time I noticed the change, it was the little things, the way my wife folded a napkin across her knee like a stranger, the way my brother laughed at jokes that used to die on the floor between us. They were small betrayals at first, a shared glance that lingered too long, a phone screen turned away when I entered the room. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was not. The reveal came on an ordinary Thursday. I came home early from work because the office had wrapped up unexpectedly, and the house smelled of coffee and something sweet I didn't recognize. My brother greeted me at the door with the overfamiliar half-hug reserved for cousins, the kind of touch that used to make me smile. He was wearing my jacket, one I'd left at his place months ago, and when I asked about it he laughed in that way people laugh when they're hiding a truth. Upstairs, a light was on in our room. My wife's voice floated down, low and intimate, saying his name the way someone says a secret. I didn't storm upstairs. I didn't shout or throw plates. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and watched the two of them move through the house like actors who had practiced all the lines I hadn't gotten to yet. They were careful with each other, conspiratorial, like thieves dividing spoils. When they finally came down, the laughter they used to hide behind had the brittle quality of glass grinding. They kissed me on the cheek as if the world had not changed. Betrayal does strange things to a man's head. Some days it makes you reckless, some days it makes you methodical. I chose methodical because I wanted something that wasn't about hurting them for the sake of hurt. I wanted a reckoning, not violence, but consequences that fit the crime, the collapse of the comfortable story they'd been living under my roof. Step 1 was truth. People excuse what they don't know. They rationalize because the comfortable narrative is easier than admitting something ugly. I began with proof. I installed little things, nothing illegal, nothing cinematic, a voice recorder tucked in a drawer, receipts saved from late-night deliveries they tried to pass off as takeout, screenshots of messages they carelessly left open when they thought I was asleep. The proof had to be clean, admissible, undeniable. Step 2 was financial exposure. My brother had always depended on my goodwill, loans paid back late, favors called in like currency. He'd built a life on my invisibility. I quietly got my finances in order and began the slow process of unwinding my exposure. I transferred accounts I'd co-signed. I documented debts and brought them to a mediator. It was a dull, bureaucratic process, but bureaucracy has teeth. Once those debts were formalized and collected on, the cushion he'd been living on thinned. Step 3 was social recalibration. Friends who had been silent when their loyalties mattered found my living room suddenly less appealing. I didn't go out and smear them. I didn't throw the affair in their faces at barbecues. I invited 2 or 3 trusted people over on different nights for small, normal things, a poker night, a movie. The idea was simple: remind the community that I existed as something other than a punchline. People began to see lines where they'd blurred them before. Small exclusions, invitations not extended, a side eye at gatherings, accumulated into a reputation that no longer included blind complicity. Gossip can be poisonous, but indifference from the group that once enabled them was the slow-acting toxin I needed. Step 4 was legal leverage. My wife and my brother had been careless with shared property and joint obligations. Bills had been charged to my name without consent, contracts had been signed where I was a silent partner. I met with a lawyer and laid everything out: dates, texts, evidence of unauthorized expenditures. The lawyer did what lawyers do best: she turned chaos into claims. Letters were sent. Notices arrived. It felt vindictive in the way paperwork always does: sterile, official, the sound of civilization asserting itself. They argued and begged and attempted to guilt me into silence, but the law does not take pleas, it takes evidence. There was one more, quieter step: reclaiming the house as mine not through confrontation, but through boundaries. I moved the things that mattered, my books, my photos, the guitar I hadn't played in years, into places that weren't up for debate. I changed passwords, not to punish them, but to protect what was mine. I stopped covering for them when a relative asked where I'd gone or why the family gatherings had shifted. I let their absence and their explanations stand on their own. The cascade was not cinematic. It was paperwork and awkward conversations and the slow burn of social realignment. My brother lost favors he had taken for granted, loans dried up when the people who'd co-signed with him realized how entangled he'd made their names. He was forced to move out of the spare room, the place he'd always claimed as temporary, and find his own flat, the kind of humbling migration that peels away entitlement. My wife's professional world, where she'd kept up a facade of perfection, began to notice the cracks, unexplained late nights, expenses that didn't reconcile, a distractedness that bled into performance. Her boss asked questions. Clients demanded clarity. Where once she used charm and proximity to smooth edges, she now had to answer for inconsistencies. I won't pretend there wasn't bitterness. There were nights I wanted the theatrical revenge that movies promise, a shouting match, a public exposure that would make everyone gasp. Instead, I watched them wrestle with consequences that matched their choices. They had thought our home was a playground where their private life could run on a different set of rules. They'd been wrong. Rules, as it turned out, were not optional just because you preferred the company that broke them. Some friends later called what I did cold. Others said it was necessary. The important thing to me was not their verdict but the absence of fear the next morning when I woke up in my bed and there was no knot in my stomach that said I had been made small by someone else's secret. The house felt different, not full, but honest. Honesty, I realized, exacts a price. I paid it with patience, paperwork, and the withdrawal of conveniences I'd once given without thought. Years from that week of discovery, my brother and my wife would both tell different versions of the story to anyone who would listen. He would say he was young and confused, she would say we had grown apart and that the affair was a symptom, not a cause. People love narratives that fold neatly into excuses. I let them tell those stories. My revenge had never been to erase their versions but to make sure those versions couldn't keep running my life. What I got back wasn't a restored past. It was a clearer future. I learned that sometimes the only revenge worth having is the one that rebuilds you rather than burns them. They had betrayed me under my roof, but when the dust settled I found the house still standing, my house, and a life in which I could choose my own guests, my own laughter, and the quiet dignity of doors closed for good reasons.